And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in here today, live and on demand on BlazeTV radio podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre and all of you at 888-900-3393. That's 888-900-3393. Steve at stevedeace.com is the email address. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. And if you're looking for clips of this show that you can sample for yourself, and then if you dig it, you can share it with others, go to youtube.com/Steve Deace, youtube.com/Steve Deace. Jam-packed Tuesday coming your way. At the bottom of the hour, we are going to get into what may be the final nail in the coffin of American journalism, if it already had not been nailed shut. And that's what's gone on with the New York Times over the past few days. We will go in depth on that here at the bottom of the hour. That will lead into fake news or not next hour. For Pop Culture Tuesday, we're going to play a little game theory. So if we're going to tell all these athletes now that they have a platform and use it for their beliefs, especially the college players who are just starting to figure out what it is that they believe in most cases, what happens when you start seeing the diversity of opinion out there? What happens when some 24-year-old BYU player back from a mission puts on his shoes, "Married Lives Matter"? What happens? Because you know it's coming. Mm-hmm. You know it is coming. I mean, these folks on the left operate in this bubble environment where they're largely surrounded by people who just think like them, and then they are able to ban people who don't, to perpetuate that mythology. When they run into real life, though, and find out that's not the case, when some college basketball player at a place like a Gonzaga, like a Catholic school like that, in January on his sneakers, writes on his shoes, "Baby Lives Matter" for Sanctity of Life Month, what's going to happen? Let's game theory this out, shall we? Because I've seen this, the block end that I'm wearing today with my favorite team. A lot of our friends in the left, President Obama gave him a shout out. Our football coach, Jim Harbaugh, went out there and marched with his players against police brutality there in Ann Arbor. Do you guys remember what he was talking about a month ago? Did an interview with one of the editors over at the National Review on a podcast. Do you guys remember this?
Baby Lives Matter.
And he said, "Baby Lives Matter." I mean, Harbaugh, he's a devout Catholic, and Todd, you could attest to this. He kind of gave you the full gamut of Catholic social teaching, right? He's kind of been a little worked over by some of the race-baiting political correctness while airing a pro-life belief at the same time. That probably is what a lot of mainstream Catholics in America would come down on both of these issues, right? They'd probably be on both of these issues, right? Mm-hmm. See them as what is it called in Catholic social teaching? The seamless garment.
Yes, it is.
Okay, right. They would act on that, right?
Yes.
And so Barack Obama didn't give Jim Harbaugh a shout out when he started talking about how terrible it is that we abort babies in America on a podcast for National Review. But now that we're in this realm, this is the world we're going to live in. Everybody, hey, use your platforms. Okay. Uh-oh. Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. What happens when that really happens? We're going to talk about that in Pop Culture Tuesday. The intersection between popular culture and conservatism coming up in the next hour of the show. But before we get to all of that, here is Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Asymptomatic spread. The World Health Organization, if you believe them, announced yesterday that asymptomatic spread of Wuhan coronavirus appears to be very rare. This is not to be confused with pre-symptomatic spread, which occurs during the virus's 14-day incubation period. And this means the virus lines up with everything else we've known about previous infectious diseases. Moving on, President Trump responded to the repeated calls from leftists to defund police departments across the country.
We won't be defunding our police. We won't be dismantling our police. We won't be disbanding our police. We won't be ending our police force in a city. I guess you might have some cities that want to try, but it's going to be very sad situation.
Meanwhile, the Minneapolis City Council, who's already pledged to do so, is facing some pretty simple questions from the media.
Who would
be responsible if you did need someone to respond with a gun? If there was an individual or a group of people simply going out there and killing other citizens for no reason at all, who would be responsible to go out there and try to stop it?
Well, in my mind, and as it stands right now today, we still have a Minneapolis Police Department, and that will be their responsibility to address those issues.
Back to President Trump, it was announced yesterday he would be resuming his in-person rallies across the country here in the next couple of weeks. NPR tweets, President Trump will hit the campaign trail this month despite the deadly coronavirus pandemic, which continues to impact the lives and livelihoods of households across the country. 48 hours earlier, NPR tweets, thousands of voices at a protest in D.C. came together to sing the Bill Withers classic, Lean on Me. The World Health Organization announced asymptomatic spread of Wuhan coronavirus is very rare. Meanwhile, congressional Democrats culturally appropriated some African garb and decided to take another knee at the Capitol when this happened. Learning Chinese today, today's phrase is, lay off the ice cream, Nancy.
放下冰淇淋，南希。
Also, Jerry Nadler wants to run your health care. According to officials at the World Health Organization, asymptomatic spread of Wuhan coronavirus is very rare. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, what you doing?
George Floyd is going to change the arc of the future of the United States.
Asymptomatic spread of the Wuhan coronavirus is very rare, according to officials with the World Health Organization. The suspect in the murder of retired St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn during the riots was arrested recently. Stephen Cannon, a 24-year-old, is accused of shooting and killing Dorn while looting a pawn shop. Cannon had previously been sentenced to 7 years in prison for felony robbery, but didn't serve a single day of his sentence. Coronavirus news, researchers at the World Health Organization announced yesterday their research shows asymptomatic spread of Wuhan coronavirus appears to be very rare. Also, new research from Harvard University suggests the outbreak of COVID-19 started back in August. The U.S. stock market had another big day yesterday. The S&P 500 in particular erased all of its losses for the year. Checking in on Joe Biden.
Excuse me. I thought you could...
Asymptomatic spread of Wuhan coronavirus is very rare, lining up the disease with all other known viral infections. That's according to researchers at the World Health Organization. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling was absolutely pilloried by the woke mob recently for continuing to insist that boys are boys and girls are girls. In a series of tweets over the weekend, she insisted that she's sympathetic to so-called transgenders, but does not believe gender is a spectrum. And finally, Florida Beach Grim Reaper update.
I think it's premature that we open our beaches.
The same one who just a couple of weeks ago was raising money to buy body bags for Florida beachgoers to warn them about the dangers of coronavirus transmission on the beach is back again. He tweets, quote, Defunct Springs, Florida, huge crowd, stay hopeful and stay strong. For those of you listening, he tweeted a picture of himself at a Black Lives Matter rally wearing an I Can't Breathe t-shirt. Asymptomatic coronavirus transmission is very rare, according to the World Health Organization. And that's what happened while we were away.
Well, now that we are beginning to open up, that doesn't mean we all just go back to our bad habits that we were doing beforehand, right? And that's where Brickhouse Nutrition comes in, particularly their outstanding product, Field of Greens. One scoop has a full serving of real USDA certified organic fruits and vegetables that boost your energy and support a healthy immune system. Plus, a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can reduce your risk of heart disease, hypertension, and a whole host, easy for me to say, a whole host of other health issues. Field of Greens is also prebiotic, probiotic. Pardon me, I'm Joe Biden. Thank you. And also a great source of vitamins, fiber, and other nutrients. Just put one scoop in any water-based drink, and you are done. You are good to go. Right now, you can save 15% off your first order with the offer code Steve at BrickhouseSteve.com. That's BrickhouseSteve.com. Some of you have asked me, how does this stuff taste? Yes, I have drank it plenty of times myself. My son drinks it. It's probably the only way we can get him to drink his vegetables. I would say it tastes like one of those green machine naked juices without the 90 grams of sugar or whatever is in it. It literally has like 90 grams of sugar, I believe, or something like that. Okay. So that's what I would compare it to. All right. 15% off your first order when you go to BrickHouseSteve.com and use the promo code Steve. And if you decide to subscribe, you're like, hey, let's get this healthy stuff in the home every month. How about 10% off of your order every month too, to get both of those discounts? BrickHouseSteve.com, promo code Steve. We are going to discuss in the overtime later today whether it matters if Colin Powell and who else? George W. Bush, who's denying that he's going to do this, by the way. But and then there was the third.
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney, thank you. Whether it matters if they all come out and support Joe Biden or not. And we'll discuss that today in the overtime. That's BlazeTV.com/Deace. That's how you can get a discounted subscription to Blaze TV if you have not yet done so. BlazeTV.com/Deace, and then use the promo code Steve to get that discount. And if you're already a subscriber, that's where you go to get it later today too. BlazeTV.com/Deace. All right, let's get to what is in the overtime. I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but major breaking news yesterday, the World Health Organization saying asymptomatic spread of coronavirus, quote, very rare. Aaron, you did mention that. That was in your montage, correct?
I believe so.
All right. I thought I heard that in there. Here's why that matters. Because it's the only thing that mattered. It's why we shut the world down, shut America down. That was our concern. It's why the NCAA tournament was canceled, all of these sporting events. The concern that these, quote, super spreader events, unquote, would occur. The asymptomatic would go and share it with one another and then take it home and inflict it upon the elderly and the infirm, right? That was the rationale. And it seemed like a realistic concern in the middle of March because it was a, quote, novel coronavirus, meaning something new. Are we sure this isn't something different? Now, the laws of immunology, virology, and biology say that that's not really how the vast majority of illnesses in the world are spread. And so about a month and a half ago, when we had Dr. Scott Atlas from Stanford University on the show, that's what he meant when he kept reiterating, hey, the laws of biology, virology, immunology don't change because of a new virus, unless we get data that shows that they do. And there was never any data that indicates this. As we speak today, the WHO is now walking this back and claiming that at least 40% in some cases of COVID-19 infections are from the asymptomatic. I can promise you in fact, my whole career in the pot right now, I promise you that's not true. Remember when I told you a couple weeks ago when our CDC said you don't have to keep scrubbing surfaces? What did I come on here and say the next day, Todd? What did I say?
Nonsense.
And I said, that was nonsense. Don't listen to that. Keep scrubbing your surfaces. Because that is what started the second wave of SARS-1, where fomites infected surfaces. Told you that back in March, actually. And then a few days later, what did our CDC take back? That. I'm telling you right now, put my whole career on it. That's complete and total BS. And if this was the Steven Crowder and not the Steve Deace Show, I'd just go ahead and say the word. Okay? Total BS. I know it right now. I don't have to look at a single blood sample. I don't have to look at a single patient file. I don't have to look at a single lab sample. I don't have to know any of it. I don't have to know a pathology of the virus. I don't have to know any of that. Here's how I can guarantee you this is true. You can do the math yourself. I mean, I barely made it out of community college. I showed up to work today wearing a hoodie with my favorite sports team's logo on it. I'm not Harvard. Simply go to every serology antibody study that's been done of this virus anywhere on planet Earth. Look at the data that those antibody studies have produced, and you will see it is mathematically impossible for 40% of coronavirus infections to come from the asymptomatic. Because given the amount of asymptomatic we have, folks, then the Imperial College survey should have been right. We should have flattened our hospitals with the infected of COVID-19, and we never did. And outside of Lombardy, Italy, and a couple locales in Spain, it didn't happen anywhere else in the world, actually, that we know of. Simply do the math. if anywhere from 4 to 20%, depending on the serology exams you're looking at, if 4 to 20% of people in every one of these communities that have antibody studies done are infected, and you're telling me that 20 or 40%, up to 40% of COVID-19 infections are spread asymptomatically, no, it doesn't work that way. The number would be millions, folks. Millions. Millions. We're with Carl Sagan, billions and billions. Nope. That's total and complete horse bleep. That's one of the worst, dumbest lies that's been told in this entire panic scam that has been a lie almost from about 5 minutes after we were initially concerned. That math doesn't work. We don't have this many people walking around carrying antibodies. And then if you look at the number of people that are actually infected, the math doesn't work. There's a correlation that does equal causation there. You cannot say 40% of people are getting this asymptomatically, and then we find out hundreds of thousands and millions more were asymptomatically infected than we ever knew. And then you're going to turn around and tell me the math doesn't add up. 2 plus 2 is not 792. It's 4. The math doesn't work. Basic times tables. This isn't a quadratic equation. Calculus? Hell, I can't do any of that. I couldn't get into this school because I got halfway through the math portion of the ACT after scoring perfect on the other 2 sections and didn't know the answer. So I literally was just filling in bubble patterns to pass the time. I failed the quick trip managerial exam. The math doesn't add up because 2 plus 2 is not 798. It is not possible for all of these antibody tests to, on the low end, say 2% of the people have it in a community. On the high end, 20% do. Find a median number there. Extrapolate that by 331 million. How many people is that? Answer, a lot. It's a lot of people. A lot more than you can imagine, Han Solo. And then you're going to say 40% of those people asymptomatically spread it to others? Then why are we closing down hospitals? Why wasn't this the stand? That math doesn't work. They're counting on you being dumb. That's what they're counting on. They're counting on you being pliable. Oh, well, yeah. And I said yesterday it wasn't, and today maybe it is. Let me tell you why they said yesterday it wasn't. I'll tell you why. You want to know? I'll connect some dots for you.
I would like to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do that for you. What happened over the weekend all over the world? What happened?
Super spreader events.
Super spreader events.
Mass suicide.
Yeah, yes, mass suicide, mass casualty events known as race protests. I'm just talking about the peaceful ones. Have you guys seen the crowds in Philadelphia, Amsterdam, London? Did you see the size of those crowds? Did you see the size of the crowd there Mr. Florida Beach's Grim Reaper dude wasn't social distancing with? And so what happens if 2 weeks from now, you know, like when we had the Wisconsin primary election and 500,000 people went out in Wisconsin and voted? And we waited for 2 weeks to see what would happen. And on this show, we told you, nothing happened. Every time the panic porn is called, it has Deuce 7 offsuit, no hand. Florida, smoldering ash, didn't happen. Georgia, an experiment in human sacrifice. I believe that's what the Atlantic wrote, right? Not so much. Our home state of Iowa didn't put a stay-at-home order in place. Anthony Fauci personally calling our governor. Since she began opening up the state, hospitalizations in Iowa have dropped at least 20%. I could go on. Sweden.
We finally had them in Lake of the Ozark. No, we didn't.
Lake of the Ozark was another smoldering ash. Didn't happen. Sweden was going to be smoldering ash. Didn't happen. Every time you've been promised smoldering ash, Remember we were kids, I want my MTV? I want my smoldering ash. I want it. I like it. I got to have it. I want my smoldering ash. So what happens when we have hundreds of thousands of people in some of these settings going out to protest all over the world? And then over the course of the next 14 days, which is the incubation period of this virus, you don't have to bike ride through the streets while Blue Oyster Cult is played on loop. How come when you don't have to fear the Reaper, what happens? Well, they don't care if the Steve Deace Show points this out. They don't care if the Daniel Horowitz Show does. They don't care if Alex Berenson's Twitter account points this out. And on I could go. Our buddy Phil Kerpen, his Twitter feed, they can ignore us. And we'll largely just reach the like-minded within our little corner of the universe. But what they cannot risk, you want to talk about a super spreader event. A super spreader event of people calling is what they can't afford. They can't afford that. So yesterday, the first day after a weekend of protest, otherwise known for those of you that went to public school as Monday, the day after the weekend ends. Yes. The first day back is when they've got to start the retcon begins. The retcon begins. And they just want to put a marker down now. Asymptomatic spread's not our latest data, which we've had since February 4th. Our latest data shows asymptomatic spread, not a problem here. Carry on. The problem was that got picked up by everybody. All right, they thought they were just going to fix a plot hole. Thought they were just going to fix a plot hole in advance. Right? Got to deal with the fact that Luke and Leia made out in the previous movie. And now in the next movie, you're telling us they're bro and sis. Dueling banjos, Star Wars style, right? So they're just out there yesterday retconning like a mother, man. Trying to just fix a plot hole, and then they're just going to Homer Bush gif, sneak back into the bushes, right? The problem was everybody, how many of those headlines were from different media outlets that you had, Aaron? Everybody picked this story up all over America. Everybody had it. Because in our country, see, every other country is over the lie. We're the last country left on earth that is still clinging to some form of the lockdown lie. We really are. We're the last one left. Everywhere else, they're over, totally over it. The Prime Minister of New Zealand was out there yesterday saying, hey, the virus is gone, everything back to normal. It's winter there, by the way. Did you know that? Because they're south of the equator. It's winter there, or about to be. It's about to be winter there. And their Prime Minister is out saying the virus is done, and I'll see you at the movies this weekend, okay? No, we are the last nation on earth clinging to this. Why? Because we're the only nation on earth with an orange man bad. So we can't have the truth because we can't have nice things. The lie must continue, right? Nancy Pelosi's got to culturally appropriate African garb that we get all of us banned, cancel cultured on Twitter, and then hit her life alert because she's fallen and she can't get up, right? Okay. So we're the last country on earth that refuses to just completely abandon this. Every other country, including a whole bunch of left-wing ones, are like, that was really dumb. Anyway, I want to kind of hit the brothels and get back to the, smoking the peace pipe. So let's just forget the whole thing. All right. We're like clinging to this because how else are you going to get Captain Dementia elected president? And so this story, this whole thing of asymptomatic spread, this was the linchpin for all the lockdowns nationwide. If they allowed their pants to get pulled down here, the lie of that, the fact that this was a lie from the beginning gets exposed. They can't afford that. But now they tried something even dumber. When they got blown away by the amount of coverage this got yesterday. It was everywhere in the news yesterday. Everybody picked it up, including panic porn peddling media entities. Why? Because the truth of the matter is, as much as a lot of these people want to beat Donald Trump in November, they like going to ball games and movies and out to eat and amusement parks too. It's not just people like us that go to these things. And so they're like, I guess if we're opening up, I guess it's okay. And now today, the WHO is trying to walk it back with a ridiculous mathematical equation that just can't possibly be true. It's just not possible. The math isn't there. It's not there. So here's the moral of this story. Don't ever consent to this ever again. Don't consent to this for another 10 seconds. Get out of your homes. Open up your businesses. Call every bluff. Defy, defy, defy. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
What you just said about this being the linchpin of keeping things closed down, that cannot be underscored enough. This was the only thing. Even when you were able to get panic porn peddling Karen backed down off of the everybody's going to die ledge and we must stay inside forever until a vaccine arrives, the glorious vaccine that's probably never ever going to appear anyway. Even when you could get her backed up, and we could do this really, really early. Heck, if you looked and if you knew what was going to be happening, you could have probably even found some of this data back in February, before things even started closing down.
Maybe like in the February 28th edition of New England Journal of Medicine, maybe.
Hey, maybe
with
something
our
like
nation's
that.
leading infectious disease expert, maybe you could have found it there. Who knows?
Maybe if you were looking hard, you could have found very early who this virus is most dangerous to. And that's what we've been talking about. The elderly, infirmed, those especially in nursing homes, very old. So then the natural conclusion was, why are we shutting down the schools? Why are we shutting down the schools? Why can't kids? And the default for Karen was always, if I had a nickel for every time I heard this over the last 3 months, well, they can spread it even if they don't show symptoms as well. That was always the default explanation. Even if you got them backed away from the most fear-mongering predictions and models, even if you could get Karen backed away from that ledge, they'd always fall back. They could always fall back on the asymptomatic spread. Timmy and Johnny are going to spread it to Grandpa and Grandma, and so we can't go outside for anything until a vaccine comes. Now the WHO comes in and, you know what, along with masks not working, it's, you know, the asymptomatic spread is can we get our funding back, please? That's basically what that was yesterday.
Yeah, speaking of those masks, that's why I love the what Nadler there thing with his African garb and the mask, and he can't get it off, and he's just like, and then he just frustrated and puts it down. I mean, everybody knows this is a scam.
Yeah. By the way, I was under the impression that photo ops were not allowed anymore.
Exactly.
Could I get a ruling on that?
Particularly religious ones, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that scene in Office Space. Can we talk about your flair? I mean, what's next? Face tattoos of George Floyd being mandatory? Listen, here's the thing. Steve, I've never openly defied you about anything in my life, but Nazi analogies, I'm all in now. I got to say. Listen, have you read?
Hey, we've thrown out the laws of immunology,
Yes,
virology,
yes.
and biology. Let's throw out Godwin's law while we're at it, right?
Have you seen, if you haven't read Elie Wiesel's Night, and you just how does it get to the point where a first world nation within the last 100 years is just herding people up like firewood into cars, train cars, and herding them off to the gas chambers? This level of unreality is how it happens. This level.
Yeah, one more. I actually had this all teed up and ready to go if I can chime this in as well. It's something that has always haunted me about Corrie ten Boom's biography. Have you heard of her, Corrie ten Boom?
Of course.
The very first chapter of that book, her brother, I believe it's, I can't remember his name, but her brother is a Reformed Dutch minister who runs a home for elderly Jewish, and he tells the tales in 1937 of taking in younger and younger Jews from Germany, telling of the madness spreading in the universities there. That has haunted me to this day, along the lines of what Todd has said.
We're to come back. If it wasn't already closed shut, the last nail pounded into the casket of American media. We'll talk about it next. So we're working from home like never before. That means we're online even more than ever before. That also means, though, that our data is out there more than ever before. And it's not even just the working online. It's the banking, the video conferences, all of that is capturing data, the meal deliveries, the shopping we're doing. And that makes us easier prey for cyber criminals, especially when they want to take the money that you have built into the equity in your home and use it against you. This is a crime known as home title theft, and the FBI is warning homeowners. Home Title Lock is how you can protect your home from these cyber thieves. Your home's legal title is online, where they find it, forge your signature, stating you sold your home to them. And then they take out loans on your home, and then they leave you with the debt, banks, insurance, even basic identity theft services. They don't protect you. But Home Title Lock will put a virtual barrier around your home's title. You can protect it right now by going to HometitleLock.com. That's HometitleLock.com. Register your address while you're there, by the way, and just to make sure that you haven't already been targeted. And then while you're there, use the promo code Steve to get 30 free days of protection to help get you through this crisis at HometitleLock.com. That's HometitleLock.com. So Todd, I know one of your driving mantras is journalism is magical and not at all broken. And I've kind of grown tired somewhat of the conservative media trope of biased liberal media, only because it's just so established now. Now, when we delve into malfeasance, to me, that's a whole new front in this battle. And one of the things we observed on this show earlier this year when the New York Times launched the 1619 Project is that it kind of struck me as that the post-credit scene in Avengers Age of Ultron, where Thanos just grabs the Infinity Gauntlet and says, fine, I'll do it myself. Like they had really hoped that ne'er-do-wells at places like Mother Jones and Salon would do this kind of dirty work and race baiting for them, and therefore they could remain above the fray and remain the old gray lady, the paper of posterity, right? And then ultimately, when those outlets were not able to do the job, the New York Times just said, fine, we'll grab the Infinity Gauntlet and we'll deconstruct America ourselves. And this continued over the weekend with what happened, the whole whiny yet amazing controversy around Senator Tom Cotton's op-ed published in the New York Times. Abigail Shrier from the Wall Street, she's a writer with the Wall Street Journal. She's going to join us here in just a second. You took particular notice of her breaking this down on Twitter and said, hey, we need to get her on the show and let our audience hear what she has to say. Tell us why.
Because she gets it. And she is I believe she's a millennial. Now, I'm now 47 years old. I worked at the Des Moines Register for 12 years, I think between the age of 29 and 41 until that ended, and I came to work for you in 2016. But for 12 years, I had the conversations with fellow reporters. Like, you realize where this is going. You understand this is not sustainable. And it always gave me, you're just a fly in the ointment. And the number of times I've heard there's a line of separation, a clear line of separation between the newsroom, Steve, and the editorial page. And you know that, Todd, you know that.
There's a line until there's not, yes, right? Well, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, until it's 4 legs good and 2 legs are better.
Here we are, where the New York Times reporters what's her name, Weiss, at the New York Times, has been thrown under the bus. Another millennial woman, for pointing that out. Like, this is just millennial temper tantrums that are. College is now here in the newsroom. I was telling them that all along. This has been a scam, and so I wanted to bring Abigail on because she pointed out the level of depth of the lie. This is her tweet less than 2 days ago. Perhaps most disgraceful are the lies offered in sacrifice to woke gods. The editorial page editor, quote, had not read the essay before it was published. Quote, running this puts all black people in danger, including New York Times staff members. You know, this is the Des Moines Register's routine background checks, which they don't do. Her point, it can't be stressed enough. They so easily lie. This is propaganda. They had long ago left journalism behind. I was telling them this 15 years ago. Now a millennial is telling you this. So if you didn't like it from me, listen to her.
Let's bring Abigail onto the show. Good to have you with us, Abigail. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show. Thanks for your patience. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
So, you know, I've been in conservative media for a decade, which means I've done a few 100,000 shows on media bias, okay? I mean, that's like conservative media personality 101. Like that's in our orientation packet when we get jobs like this, is dealing and confronting media bias. But in the last couple of years, it seems we have gone beyond media bias to just flat out malfeasance. And I wonder if what's gone on in the New York Times the last few days, is it the last nail in the coffin for American media, Abigail?
It may be. I mean, it's a very sad thing that's happened. I mean, I know some conservatives are very excited about it because they think that they just sort of outed themselves. I'm not excited about it. I think it's really a tragedy. It may have added some clarity to the issue, but what we're seeing is the collapse of classical liberalism. All that does is feed the alligator. And the New York Times just handed a big victory to some very bad people and emboldened them to further stifle free inquiry. It's a very bad move, and it's not good for any of us. What'd
you think of my analogy that I gave right before we brought you on? That I kind of viewed them taking on the 1619 project as almost they're acknowledging now to do what they would like to do to deconstruct America. They're the ones that have to get their hands dirty now. The seedy underbelly red light district of the American left blogosphere doesn't have enough transcendent reach to get into the suburbs and the exurbs and the rural areas of America. So therefore, the old gray lady decided, hey, you know what? If you want a job done right, you got to do it yourself.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, I think that what happened in the New York Times was a kind of devolution into kinderarchy, right? The children are now in charge. This is governance by children, and the adults are scared of the kids. James Bennett had a job. The editorial page editor of the New York Times had a job, and what he in the classical liberal tradition believed his job was to curate opinion, a wide variety of opinion, contrary opinion that was likely to impact the lives of Americans, and give it its sort of most articulate form. And the opinion offered by Tom Cotton in the pages of the New York Times was one supported by 58% of Americans. This was a somewhat mainstream view. And in each time, this happens, these kinds of, kerfuffles occur, basically there's a classical liberal who says, not that I agree. No one thinks the New York Times agreed with Tom Cotton's opinion. He's one of the most conservative members of the Senate. But what they thought was the New York Times was taking a classical liberal stance, saying we can handle contrary opinions here. We can all handle that. Mm-hmm. And the millennials stood up to say, no, we can't. We will not abide that. And we've seen this again and again, perhaps since Larry Summers stepped down from Harvard presidency over the exact same issue. He said that we could have a discussion about, women in science, an open discussion here. And the woke faculty rose up and said, no, we can't. You saw this with Erica Christakis at Yale in 2015. You saw this with Heather Hying and Brett Weinstein over at Evergreen State College. They were run out of the college. And each time it was the same issue where a classical liberal stood up and said, but we can have an intelligent discussion among people who disagree right here. And each time the progressive millennials stood up and said, no, we can't. That's violence.
So I'm a proud evangelical. We like to kid on the show. We put the fun in fundamentalism here on this program, okay? Which made me astonished when I was looking at the Twitter feed of the Benjamin Franklin of the modern gay rights movement, Andrew Sullivan, and it looked like, frankly, I had hijacked his feed, and he was now, or he had somehow spiritually channeled me and was now just tweeting my words through his keyboard, talking about censorship, a lack of critical thinking, an inability to tolerate aberrant views. I mean, we talk about these themes on the right all of the time. And we talk also, Abigail, about the polarization, and I like to call it the Balkanization of America, that we're really more of a Yugoslavia than just frankly polarized. If you're in one of those ex-Serbian rural areas of America and you're following this, and Andrew Sullivan's not woke enough for you, a guy that is on the cutting edge of one of the leading social reform movements, whether you agree with it or not. I don't agree with it, but I respect and recognize its accomplishments and achievements for sure. He was on the cutting edge of that. He helped pave the way for that. If his opinion cannot be tolerated in the public square, if these people are in power, where's room for people like me and folks in audiences like this then in their world?
Well, I think you're right. There isn't room increasingly. I mean, it's a big problem. I mean, look, what I think it takes a lot of backbone these days, unfortunately, to be an editor of a major publication. And what James Bennett should have said to the New York Times was, I will protect this institution as America's paper of record. He should have said, this is the editorial page where the highest level of discussion can occur, whether or not we all agree with it or not. Instead, he put up a half-hearted defense, and then he crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide, the moment that his young editors raised objections. And worst of all, he stuck a knife in the back of one of the few journalists who was willing to stand up and defend him, and that was Barry Weiss, who apparently has more integrity and courage than the entire masthead of the New York Times put together.
So final thing I want to ask you about then, for members of our audience that don't work in the media and don't understand how this will influence the rest of the platform, especially on a side of the media that a lot of them don't consume. Effectively, what I saw this is we have one of the largest conservative media platforms in the country here at The Blaze, right? But nobody has a bigger one than Fox. Imagine if Fox just decided, F it, Alex Jones, 8 o'clock primetime, new show, right? That would have major ramifications for all of conservative media. What that would do if they decided that they were willing to inject that into the zeitgeist, right? How does that similarly what the New York Times did last week? What does this mean going forward for the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, CBS, the whole, they're along with the Associated Press, they're basically the mouth of the river, right? So the rest of the tributaries here in this ecosystem, what happens to them from here, seeing this precedent?
That's right. Look, I'm a conservative, but I have a lot of liberal friends like everybody else. And a lot of them were writing to me from different, I heard from people in different publications how frightened they were. And these were not conservatives. These are classical liberals. They were afraid, that their jobs were on the line at all the major publications if they don't, say the right things. This is not something you want, members of the press worried about. You don't want them terrified of a woke mob, but that's what you have. My friend at Free Beacon, Noah Pollack, pointed out, and I thought it was a great point. He said, the idea that they feel unsafe is completely untrue. The idea that, that young writers from the New York Times feel unsafe because Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed in the New York Times is just completely untrue. What this was a power grab, and it was. It was a very effective power grab by the woke millennials, and it just fed the alligator. I don't know what they're going to take over next.
The mob outside Lot's house will not be satiated now that you've incentivized it. It's going to see the night through now. We're going to see where this ultimately goes because we don't ever slouch towards Gomorrah. It's rare for me to disagree with the late, great Robert Bork, but we don't slouch to Gomorrah as a species. We sprint. Every time we start the race, it becomes a sprint. Abigail Shrier,
right.
Go ahead.
And I think your point is excellent that every time you take reasonable opinions, and Tom Cotton's view was shared, the idea that, if American cities are being overwhelmed, if life and limb and property is being threatened by violent protesters and the police are overwhelmed, that the American government should send in military is not a very controversial view. I guess obviously it was somewhat controversial, but it's shared by 58% of Americans and probably 100% of Americans whose life and property were on the line, right? If we can't have an open discussion about the merits and demerits of that view, then what you're left with is an America, as you said, that's completely balkanized, that we have provocateurs on both sides who are the only ones who can get their opinions heard. And we don't have reasoned discussion anymore.
Very well said, Abigail Shrier. Thank you for joining us. Really eloquent. Appreciated having you on here today. Take care. All right.
Thank you so much.
You bet. So here's something you may not know about your dog's food, but the same problem that our food has, which is why we're taking so many supplements today. All the really good, nutritious stuff is stripped out so that it can be mass produced and then stay on the shelf for maybe like 2 years. Same thing happens to our dog's food too. And that's why we're taking supplements. Your dog could use it as well. That's where Rough Greens VitaSmart comes in. It is not a new dog food, but it is a premium dog food supplement. It's a powder that you sprinkle on your dog's food. And apparently it tastes great too because our dog absolutely loves it. It contains also massive amounts of vitamins, minerals, digestive enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics, even omega oils and antioxidants, all the stuff your dog needs for a healthy and balanced diet. It's their one-a-day supplement, if you will. And if you want to try it, they're going to love it. If you want to try it and help your dog to feel better than ever before. All right, go to roughgreens.com/blaze. That's RUFF. That's how they spell it. roughgreens.com/blaze. Again, that's roughgreens.com/blaze. Todd, so you're the one that discovered her for the show. Your thoughts on the conversation we just had with Abigail Shrier?
Well, I even believe more greatly that what I just said before the show, based on how nice that person is. See, I'm not nice. Steve's not nice. Cranky
no,
old guys.
I'm not nice. Many things. Some of them are even okay. Nice would not be one of them.
She's nice though, but again, she pointed out they're liars. They're just liars. And if you extrapolate the reality of what she's saying beyond this conversation, it points to what we've been saying on the show for a long time. We are in a civil war. The horse has left the barn. Stop lying to yourself that you are dealing with people, as Steve says, that want to share a country with you. They do not. Human history does not have some kind of safety button just for you here in the era of 2020, where you aren't going to be treated any differently than those in the past who have been dehumanized, like those who aren't woke.
The word that stuck out to me there, did you catch that? It was at the very beginning, and I was thinking about that a lot. The kinderarchy.
Yes.
Did you like that?
Yeah, I did like that. Yeah, that got my attention too. Yeah.
I like that as well. Completely unrelated question. Do you think the Children of the Corn ever took over the Gatlin, Nebraska newspaper? Do you think that ever happened? Because that's what's happening right here. I mean, this is a cult of children following this cult that's taking over a major institution, and it has forever. But we're crossing, I mean, it seems like every week we cross a new Rubicon of when is it going to really set in with us? They have no interest in sharing a country with you. They have no interest whatsoever. And if it were up to them, they'd destroy you.
If there's no room at the end for Andrew Sullivan, who is a godfather of the modern American left, if there's no room at the end for him, you don't even have a parking space, brother. All right? Hour 2 is next. And we're back with Hour 2, live and on demand here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin and all of you. Let us know what you think about what we think. Steve at stevedeace.com is how you can email the program to do exactly that. DEACE. Almost forgot how to spell my name there for a second. You can also find us on Facebook and like us there. Follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show and youtube.com/Steve Deace. If you're a podcast listener, we greatly appreciate you. Please hit that subscribe button and give us a 5-star review if you haven't done so already. Heck, if you have, keep use all your burner accounts. Just keep, stuff in the ballot box. We'll call them mail order. Yeah. That's what we'll do.
Vote a couple times.
Yeah, we'll vote a couple times. Mail in 5-star reviews. All right, for the show that puts the mail it in the mail in. All right. So thank you to all of you, the thousands of you that have left us one of those 5-star reviews already. Each and every one of them are appreciated. Coming up here in just a matter of moments, Fake News or Not, which is brought to you by Freedom Financial. The anxiety and stress caused by debt can be overwhelming. It makes you feel alone, like there's no way out. But there is a way out. You don't have to go through it alone. And Freedom Debt Solutions is here to help. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to getting out of debt. Freedom Debt Solutions, therefore, has more than 400 debt experts standing by to recommend the right solution to your specific situation. And no matter which solution you may qualify for, Freedom Debt Solutions could help you get rid of expensive credit and debt faster than you can on your own. All right. And low, affordable monthly program payments as well. Since 2002, Freedom Debt Solutions has served 750,000 clients, settled over 2.7 million accounts, and over $10 billion in debt. So if you've got $10,000 or more in credit card debt, if you're struggling to make monthly payments, there is hope. Stop the stress and anxiety your debt is causing. Find out now how you can get help at Freedom Debt Solutions with one of their experts and a free personalized debt consultation today. Go to freedomdebtsolutions.com/Steve. That's freedomdebtsolutions.com/Steve. One more time. freedomdebtsolutions.com/Steve. All right, are we ready to go? Fake news or not, right?
Let's do it.
All right, so remember, we are not fact-checking propagandists. This is taking a look at whether those people and platforms that claim to be what is left of America, are they fake news or not? Beginning with Lindsey Graham promises this time he promises, this time he'll get to the bottom of the deep state.
McCabe is firing back. He says this: Mr. Rosenstein's claims to have been misled by me or anybody from the FBI regarding our concerns about President Trump and the campaign's interactions with Russia are completely false. Mr. Rosenstein approved of and suggested ways to enhance our investigation of the president. Further, I personally briefed Mr. Rosenstein on Jim Comey's memos describing his interactions with the president. Somebody's lying here. Are you going to call Andrew McCabe to testify in front of your committee?
Just as sure as the sun rises and sets, I will.
So now he's metastasizing. It's not just the 47 appearances on Hannity's show promising to get to the bottom of the deep state, Aaron. He is now moving on to other programs, even other channels. Fox Business News, I think, is where he appeared on this show. As soon as the sun sets, he says. Fake news or not? What do you think, Aaron?
Is that some sort of weird euphemism?
I take you think it's fake news.
It's fake news.
Yeah. Todd?
Well, the question specifically was, are you going to get to the bottom of this? Is that what she said?
Are you going to subpoena Andrew McCabe? Yes.
Oh,
For those who don't remember, and frankly, I think most of the people in our audience know more about this than we do probably. But Andrew McCabe is the former deputy director of the FBI who was forced to resign. I believe he was even charged with criminal leaking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyway, continue your answer.
I think that really could be true news. He might subpoena him. There's no reason to believe that's going to lead to anything like fundamental justice. He likes the theater. You can subpoena somebody, make them show up, get the theater you want. So yeah, that could easily be true. That's why I asked. I wanted to be clear what he said. Is there going to be justice? Well, of course not. That would be fake news. But am I going to subpoena him? Yeah, because that's going to be fun. It's showtime.
That reminds me to grab this pen here. I got to make a note.
You know, I'm right.
Another question I need to ask when I get to heaven. How did South Carolina elect Lindsey Graham all these years?
Are you writing that with a Nancy Pelosi sucks pen?
I am not. No, that's on my list of I gots to know. That's my gots to know list. On my gots to know list is I gots to know how all y'all in South Carolina sent this guy, this effeminate poser, to the U.S. Senate for decades. I just need to know how he managed to pull that off, if for no other reason that maybe I have misjudged him. And he's actually the alpha dog 4D chess player in the room that he got y'all to do it all these years. I don't care what the answer is. Just, I will not be able to lay into eternal rest until I get said answer. I need to know. I need to know what it is. All right. Todd, this one's for you. I don't know if you know this or not, but no one really wants to live without the police.
Commissioner, this thing is coming at us pretty quickly. It's we're used to hearing this sort of rhetoric, and it hangs around for a few years. But you've got the city of Minneapolis actually saying, no, we're going to go through with this, and other cities are watching it as a model.
You know what's funny, Charles, when you were talking to Senator Scott, and he was talking about what they do in China and how they do it and why, and the Communist Party, what we're hearing is right out of the Antifa handbook, which parallels what they do in communist China. So it's kind of odd to listen to him. I almost thought he was talking about Minneapolis. Here's the bottom line. You defund the police or diminish their ability to police their communities, you're going to have a war zone. We learned this back in the 90s. In 1990, there were 2,400 murders in New York City. When Giuliani came in 1994, he basically came in with a model that nobody was going to live, visit, or work, or go to school in a place where they weren't safe. So his number one priority was to reduce crime. And for every percentage point we did, we saw income economic income, highest rates. We saw the highest property values. We saw lowest poverty. The lowest murder, the lowest violent crime. Communities were much better off. You start taking that away, you take the police's ability to do their job, you're going to see the reverse. That's all there is to it.
Former New York City Police Chief Bernard Kerik there. Of course, he was the man that, if you remember back in the day with 9/11, who was often at Rudy Giuliani's side in the aftermath of that terrorist attack. Todd, what do you think, fake news or not?
That's largely not fake news. I can't speak for every jot and tittle of the allusions to data about what happened with Giuliani getting tough on crime. But, now you see Rudy Giuliani kind of, being Trump's henchman of sorts and Twitter 2.0. And, of course, you know him from 9/11. But really, that's the Rudy Giuliani that was always the most interesting to me because, listen, he's not some conservative, but that was just like baseline common sense, how you have to govern a city in order to enjoy all the other fruits that this place called New York offers.
There's assumptions. There are things in this world you cannot control. You can't just project your desires upon. Yes. You can't just magically think and conjure truth into existence. Yeah. There are certain things in this world that are objectively true and predetermined, whether you want them to be or not. And so you have to set aside some of your own preferences and biases in acknowledgement of those truths, right?
Yeah.
We used to call that, there was a term we had for that. Common sense, right?
Yeah, and he applied it without apology. And New Yorkers, for the most part, who, they're not Republicans, seem to appreciate it. Like, I want to go out and I want to go do my things that liberals do. I just don't want to feel like I'm at risk of my life all the time. That's not radical, but we have totally rejected it today.
Like a buddy of mine rolled up was in D.C. yesterday. And I tweeted this photo out, and he rolls up at a D.C. restaurant, and 3 or 4 Democratic U.S. senators are sitting there having dinner together. No masks, no social distancing. And, and he puts out a tweet about this yesterday and sends it to me. Social distancing for thee, but for me, or for me, but not for thee, or reopening for me and not for thee is what he said, right? And I read through it. I saw his photo. I'm like, man, I long for the days when they just said these things to get power and knew that they didn't work. And then when they got control, they instituted some form of common sense because in the end, they didn't want their property destroyed and their kids' schools burnt to the ground either, right?
Right.
I miss the old hypocrisies, don't you? Because now we're literally debating whether we should defund police or not.
Yeah. Across the entire country.
Yeah. I miss that just being like a talking point to get power into race bait. And then afterwards, Bill Clinton signs the 3 strikes and you're outlaw. Yeah. I miss those days. Now,
Clinton is the perfect poster child for that mindset you're talking about. Yes. He really is.
Yeah. Now it is, maybe we can just do this. We can have community spread justice. We don't have to have a police.
Get that trademarked.
Aaron, what do you think?
It's true news. And this is, what we're talking about here, common sense. It's just an arm of the natural law.
Yeah.
It's an arm of understanding human nature as well, that we're not inherently good. See, it would make sense. Why would we even need police or any laws at all if man were inherently good? But if man is inherently bad, then we need laws and we need enforcement to be able to enforce those laws. What we're talking about here, the antithesis of what you just described with Bill Clinton, it's just straight up madness. It makes no sense. It's Wolf Blitzer asking that Minneapolis city councilwoman, what happens when there is a mass shooting event? Who's going to respond then? And her response, did you catch that today in the montage? Her response was, well, it'd be the Minneapolis Police Department's. What happens if there's no police?
I got TP for my bunghole.
Yeah.
Yes.
What happens if there's no police department and there's a mass shooting? The police would get there. it's just madness. Don't try to explain it. It's just insanity.
We haven't used this term as much. I busted this out a few years ago when I really started hammering the point that it kind of everybody's in on now, that what we're dealing with here is not a political movement, but a religious cult, a spirit of the age religious cult. That's what progressivism and wokeness, that's really what it is, right? And I used to use this term on this show a lot to describe it. And I hadn't thought about it for a while. And then Aaron, you just exhibited it perfectly, and then the clip that you referenced. Remember this term we used to use a lot, which was
lucid insanity.
Lucid insanity, yes. That like if you asked them, hey, is 2 + 2 = 4? Yes. Is pi 3.14? Yes. What's your phone number? Yes. Right? Yeah. Okay. There would be lucidity there. But then when you ask them the questions about the ways of the world and how it works and what their place is in it.
Do all men have vaginas?
Yes. Utter insanity. Utter insanity would be what comes out of it. It's Daniel Radcliffe going hard at J.K. Rowling, the woman who made him what he is, frankly, because she refuses to accept that beings other than women can have a period. That's just insane.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane what this stuff is. And it makes you insane when you embrace it.
Yeah, back in Giuliani's day, I mean, New York, it's like, we want you to come enjoy our Epicurean delights.
Yes.
But there's got to be some level of decorum for that to be possible. Now the chaos is the Epicurean delight that they're selling.
At least when you went to Corinth, you knew there were the male prostitutes here and the female prostitutes here, right?
Right.
The idea that they were like, we have we're the proto Baskin Robbins of antiquity. Yeah. We have 57 flavors of orifice.
Yeah,
okay? Nuts! It's just nuts.
Yeah, now when you go to Corinth on the loudspeakers everywhere, it's dude looks like a lady, and if you don't like it, we're gonna stone you.
Yes. and you're like, hey, I'm totally fine if another guy wants to go see the male prostitutes. It's not my thing. I'm an Epicurean myself, but that's not my preferred orifice. So why are you a homophobe? Why are you a bigot then? Isn't that what we're talking about?
We are.
Absolute insanity. I mean, and J.K. Rowling is out there affirming every one of their premises. She affirms 56 of their 57 premises. She asks for sanity with one. With one.
Yeah.
And it's verboten. It cannot happen. It cannot occur.
When you become the millionaire after the movie is made and you open up that ice cream line with your blueberry one that you've always
57
wanted,
orifices?
Yes, that's got to be one of them.
Todd is referencing, I haven't done it in the last couple of years. They finally discouraged me. But for several years, I would enter the Ben & Jerry's flavor contest, where if you suggest a flavor and they pick up on it, I don't know if you win a cash prize or Ben & Jerry's for life, because those communists make some dope ice cream, man. And I've every year I would enter in Blueberry Hill, which was blueberry flavored ice cream with a milk chocolate fudge ribbon and a marshmallow ribbon. Okay.
He's not fake news.
He is so earnest in describing this.
I know, not fake news.
Listen, if you don't take anything I've said this whole show seriously, you better take that. Because I entered that flavor like 5 years in a row, man. And I'm like, I would eat that. Wouldn't you eat that?
Sure.
I think that sounds great. No, they rejected me every time. Let's get to our next clip. Joe Biden something.
I don't envy him. He is in between a rock and a hard place in his decision to pick a VP because it's really going to signal to Democrats and really to the independent voters that he needs to win over what type of administration he would carry out if president. Is he going to go down the path of a defund the police, quite radical administration, or is he going to try to be more moderate? Neither Kamala Harris nor Elizabeth Warren are moderates in the policies that they have supported.
Todd, what do you think? Fake news or not?
I think Kelsey Bowler, now used to be Harkness, is fantastic, but I think that's fake news. I think it just does, as long as it's not just a straight old white man, it's going to be fine because they're going to vote for him anyways, and they're going to yell at him anyways, no matter what. I mean, it's just how it is. Somebody is going to get crucified. You didn't go far enough into the wokeness scale. That's going to happen no matter who he picks, and then they're all going to vote for him anyways.
Aaron?
Totally. Yeah, my analysis is not much different from that. I mean, between a rock and a hard place, no, it's just, I don't think you're going to really add that much. The same people who are going to vote for you no matter what are still going to vote for you if you pick Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, or fill in the blank with leftists. The same people who were ticked off with the Democratic Party, the Bernie bros, because their guy didn't get in, are still not probably going to vote for you no matter who you pick because they're just ticked off. So I don't think at this juncture the VP really makes much of a difference.
Agree with both of you, but it can't be. That stands as long as it's not another straight white male, right?
Oh, it can't be that.
Yeah, it can't be that. It could literally be anything else other than that, but it cannot be that. Correct? Okay. All right, this next clip, kind of the same vein of the analysis you guys gave on Biden and his VP pick, but from the other side of the looking glass. Watch this.
If you have people who were nominated and in the case of President Bush actually elected to be president by Republicans, and that they will no longer support the Republican nominee who went through the process and got elected, then I'm going to be not just unhappy, I'm going to be livid. And I'll tell you why. We didn't all agree on some of the policies of Bush or McCain or Romney. But, you know, when it came down to it, we had a choice. We could choose a far left liberal or we could choose somebody that was closer to our views. I get it that Donald Trump's bedside manner is somewhat more like Mean Joe Green than it is the cool, collected Tom Brady if it's on the football field. But here's what I just don't understand with these never Trumpers. This president is more pro-life than we've ever had, period. He's more pro-Israel. He has deregulated so much government so that the businesses of America can thrive, and they have until this COVID stuff happened. This is a president who has stood up to the globalist, stood up to the unfair trade practices, brought back American jobs, has done more for minorities than any president in my lifetime in actually helping people to have good, decent jobs and a future. This is a president who has reformed criminal justice. There's an incredibly long litany of things he's done. And some of them say, but I don't like his personality. Well, get over it.
Aaron, what say you? You get to go first this time.
It's amazing how I can disagree with so many things and so many people within one short clip. So let's start with what he first remarked, talking about, I think, Colin Powell and Mitt Romney, and I think he was talking about George W. Bush as well, even though that's not actually true. People who have indicated that they are not former Republicans or working for Republicans who have indicated that they are not going to vote for Donald Trump. All right. The reasoning that he gives for why they need to do that is because he's the Republican nominee, and you're being hypocritical because we all rallied behind you back when you were the nominees or what have you, and now you're not for this guy as well. Now, all those guys that he just mentioned, Mitt Romney, Colin Powell, you don't have to support the nominee. Well, I was not a Republican back then, but there was a measurable chunk of the Republican Party back in 2016 that did not want to get behind it, did not rally behind Donald Trump. We know that as well. But you don't have to support the nominee just because he's the nominee. This is not the church. This is not the church at all. This is not the church of Jesus Christ right here. We're not nominating a savior. So that reasoning is wrong. But also the reason why they're not supporting President Trump is because of that long litany of things that Mike Huckabee listed, even though all of those things might not actually be true, with the exception of the pro-life issue. All those things might not actually be true. But Donald Trump is perceived as having been all of those things to those guys. And so that's why Mitt Romney and, fill in the blank don't want to support him, because they perceive him as actually being conservative, even though it's up for debate whether or not he's actually accomplished as much as what Mike Huckabee fit in there. So does that make sense at all? There's so much confusion going on there. There's just so much confusion. And I think that if they would have rearranged, if Mike Huckabee would have just rearranged words just a little bit there, I probably would have agreed with a lot more. But Yeah. I think the whole thing is almost the whole thing is fake news. The core claim there, though, that you need to support the Republican nominee because he's the Republican nominee, that's total fake news.
Todd, what do you think?
It's fake news largely from a meta level because his advocates are such a terrible job of what is it in a lot of Protestant, like accountability circle, isn't that
accountability groups,
things like that?
Yeah,
Trump's suck. I mean, he's just nothing about coronavirus, the lockdowns, or the riots are mentioned within that. It's just a vacuum of conversation that he's having there that has nothing to do with the reality at hand. We need a president right now, Republican, Democrat, man, woman, whatever, doing a job. But we needed that before we ever heard of lockdowns too. But it's always this level of dinner theater. It's just always the show. He has done some good things. I mean, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen Steve Deace do, and that's a pretty damn long list, where after the 2016 election, after this show being Never Trump, and all of us agreed on that, just saying he's our president now, and we gotta see if this thing is doable. We can't torpedo it right out of the gate. That took a lot of courage of conviction. That's not a level of conviction that Mike Huckabee is showing there. We needed more Mike Huckabee of willing to put down the constant apology tour, if he in fact had access to him all along in a way that like this show didn't, and get him across the finish line about the constituencies that Mike cares about.
One more clip. The man of the hour, Senator Tom Cotton.
The Times issued a statement after it published it, saying this: we've examined the piece and the process leading up to the publication. This review made clear that a rushed editorial process led to the publication of an op-ed that did not meet our standards. Here to react right now is the senator himself, Senator Tom Cotton of the Armed Services, Intelligence, Banking, and Economic Committees. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me, Senator. What happened with the Times op-ed? Was it rushed?
Hardly, Maria. I will say my op-ed didn't meet the Times standards. It far exceeded their standards, which is usually sophomoric left-wing drivel.
Todd, you get to go first this time. What do you think?
There it is. Outstanding. Obvious. Talk about 1 + 1 = 2. And it goes back to what we already talked about with our guest. I mean, they're some of the most brazen liars, the people who now man this place called journalism, that have ever existed in professional enterprise in this country.
Aaron?
That is absolutely true news. And furthermore, you've seen over the last couple of months places just crazy bat crap left-wing places like Vice cut a lot of their employees. I wonder, and I'm saying this, I'm not trying to own the libs here. I honestly wonder if we're at the point now where places like the New York Times and the Washington Post have just made it to where there's no market.
Right.
For
all
Vice.
Those entities are a redundancy now. Yes.
Precisely.
Yep.
So I think that's apropos, and I think the senator is not fake news.
There was no point in ripping the Columbia House insert out of the TV guide for a 47th time with a penny to get a whole new batch of CDs that you were never going to subscribe and pay for later when they invented Napster, right?
That's a good analogy.
Okay, I mean, this is a redundancy now. All of the entire left-wing blogosphere is a redundancy now. It has all been co-opted by the corporate leftist media. And this is why I have made the conscientious decision to, like, I've got the president's Twitter account on mute. So even if you guys tweet in response, I don't know what he's saying. On purpose.
That's probably good today, if you've heard.
Okay, because it's to me, that persona is the most annoying and grating aspect of his entire presidency. I just don't like fake tough guys. I don't dig it at all. Okay. That notwithstanding, though, I'm not really into cigar smoke. But if you're going to put me in a civil war, and the guy over there that's on his 9th stogie before morning tea, and if he's the general, and he's the one we got, and he's the killer we have, and the killer we need, I'll wear a mask. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I'll talk to him from the other side of the door, because I'm not afforded the luxury of the annoyance of his vices. And I think that's where I have made, along with some of the accomplishments that Mike Huckabee mentioned, those things are true. I also think we've overrated those accomplishments, though, because of how bad the Republican Party was before he took over.
Also true.
All right, I think that we have way inflated this. I mean, we were the political constituency version of a woman with a biological clock. An attractive woman at 40 or 42 years. Isn't that a new reality show? A beautiful 42-year-old woman who couldn't find a mate. Now she's worried she's not going to have a kid. And so men are literally vying to impregnate her. Didn't I read about that last week? I believe that's a new reality show.
I believe it.
Okay. That's kind of what we as conservatives are with the Republican Party. And, at this point, we realized after a while, no one was even going to try to meet our standards. Wasn't even going to try. And yet we still have these natural desires that we would like to see fulfilled. And so if at first you don't succeed, you lower your expectations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so a guy at 42 that had no shot in any context with me to get a single digit of my 7, I'm now, I'm with him on Bumblebee and Tinder because the pickings are getting slimmer. So I think we've overrated his accomplishments because we have spent 20 years being abused by people named Bush, McCain, Romney et al.
True.
That notwithstanding, though, the other big reason for my evolution is it became clear to me these last couple of years, civil war is upon you, whether you want it or not. And I'm just at that point, and again, this is just me talking, Steve Deace, individual, doing the mental math myself. I can't justify the angst and frustration and disgust and disdain I have with some of his vices, given the fact that there's a gun to my head pointed right at me from the left right now. We'll come back. Pop Culture Tuesday is next. So be honest, were you one of the many victims of the so-called Quarantine 15 during the lockdowns here this spring? If that was you, the good news is summer is just around the corner. So let's just, reboot all those New Year's resolutions and get back on the wagon, will you? Doctor-developed Riduzone is an excellent way to help you do exactly that because it helps you to curb cravings for the fattening foods that derail your discipline. And it's backed by 2 U.S. patents. It's also the only FDA-accepted product that includes OEA. That's the naturally occurring molecule that helps you to feel full faster, burns stored fat while reducing your calorie intake at the same time. So that's what's key because it's often not what you're eating, but how much. Get those portion sizes and cravings under control with Riduzone. And right now, if you use my name, Steve, as a promo code, you'll get up to 65% off plus free shipping. Up to 65% off plus free shipping when you go to the website riduzone.com. Riduzone. That's the only place you can get Riduzone is on the website. Riduzone for riduzone.com. Use the promo code Steve. Something dawned on me last break and I tweeted it out. Imagine you're an American leftist.
No.
And let me try that again. Imagine being an American leftist and you get away with calling anybody who disagrees with you a racist at face value. You get the power to ban opinions and even whole platforms that you don't agree with. Have them evicted from the public square. You control the daily media narrative to the point that the vast majority of your opposition media, which is where we work, conservative media, most of it is reacting to your narratives. I mean, how much of what we call conservative media is actually proffering an alternative agenda and narrative, as opposed to just countering the one that comes from the left, right?
Right.
And yet, despite all of those inherent advantages, let me try that again. And yet, despite all of those inherent advantages, these people's ideas are so insane, they still lose elections all the time. Think about that. I didn't even mention the monolithic control over pop culture they have, which we're going to talk more about that here in a moment. So I don't want that senator's op-ed in the paper. It's gone. And we will never do that ever again. Alex Berenson's ebook, first time ever, Amazon refused to publish an ebook. First time ever. I can just evict people and whole platforms from the public square when they're inconvenient for me. I can immediately label those who disagree with me racist, misogynistic, xenophobic, homophobic bigots, and have that literally end the argument in most cases. And my opposition spends most of its own infrastructure not creating its own narrative, but in reacting and responding to mine. And then I control pop culture on top of it. The most influential sector in all of Americana is pop culture. And yet, despite all of those advantages, my ideas are still so insane that I lose elections all the time. You ever looked at it that way before?
Well, it reminds me of an economic argument about how the greatness of American enterprise, as laden as it is, and more so before Donald Trump came along, credit to him, but with regulation and the American consumer with high taxation, how just the inherent quality of the machine is able to continue to go along and not grind to a halt.
Right.
You're making the same argument, but on a cultural level. But there's just a sooner or later argument to the entire thing, is there not? I mean, there's always going to be an 11th hour. Ultimately, that can't go on indefinitely.
Let's talk about what also can't go on indefinitely. All right, let's get to Pop Culture Tuesday when we look at the intersection between pop culture and conservatism. And what's happening right now in the sports world is after it was vanquished following the 2016 election, and it nearly vanquished ESPN and much of sports media, and it caused, by some estimates, a 17% drop in NFL. I can't remember if that was attendance or TV ratings. All right, sports wokeness is having a resurrection moment right now, and a lot of it is because this is a much easier cause to rally behind. At least based on what we know, the obvious unjust death of George Floyd is a lot more, and even if he did have fentanyl and meth in his system, as the local autopsy report says, even if all that turns out to be true, and believe me, the cops' attorneys are gonna bring all this out at a trial. We're gonna know what really happened here, one way or the other, at this trial, I believe. But even if all that's true, it doesn't justify knee choking him out over 9 minutes, right? So this obvious, based on what we know, obviously unjust death is a much easier rallying cry than a multi-million-dollar pampered athlete whose adopted parents were white, whose football coach that was the only one at a major school to offer him a scholarship to play quarterback was white, meaning that white America has been fairly friendly to Colin Kaepernick. That's how he got where he's at. Frankly, they opened all kinds of doors for him. His coach in the NFL, Jim Harbaugh, benched the white quarterback that was the number 1 overall pick in the draft in order to start him, who was picked in the 2nd round. In the middle of the season, that happened, actually.
The conservative Catholic guy did that.
Yes, okay. And suddenly he meets a Black Lives Matter's hottie. They start hooking up. He's now Fletch 6'9" with afro, and he's on the Public Enemy tilt, okay, and he's in between stacking up pairs of shoes in his closet that's like 3,000 square feet of shoes because he's so wealthy, and he writes "cops are pigs" on his $300 sneakers. That's not a transcendently sympathetic figure, right?
Right.
George Floyd and what happened to him, that visual is. And so sports wokeness is having a resurrection moment right now. It's back. And this goes along with, in college sports in particular, we're in an age of player empowerment right now. We're going to get rid, it's not going to happen this year, but next year they're going to get rid of the long-standing rule. It's been there our whole lives. If you transfer, you have to sit out. Everybody's going to get to transfer one time and go wherever they want now without sitting out. We're finally going to do name, image, and likeness, which I've been a proponent for all along because I think they're adults and they're not getting back the value that they're putting into the agreement with the scholarship, as far as I'm concerned. And now there's social media. And so you've got liberal, left-wing, white, fake woke social justice warrior media, applauding these athletes giving their take on racial identity politics in this day and age. What happens, though, when they learn, gentlemen, what happens when they learn that it ain't no fun, as my mama used to tell me, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun? Because hey, just as, I've been quoting this line because I just saw the movie again a couple weeks ago and reminded how much I love Star Trek First Contact. So I've been quoting this the last couple of weeks. Just like their Borg won't stay on Deck 16, neither will ours. All right? So right now, George Floyd looks like that's a unifying story. Even for a lot of people that don't support rioting and looting and Black Lives Matters, you're not going to find too many people that are like, hey man, that guy had it coming. You're not going to find too many of those folks, even on the right. What happens, though, when the 24-year-old BYU player is back from mission and on his sneakers he writes, "Married lives matter"? What happens when the Tim Tebow-inspired kid at a college basketball player at a Notre Dame or a Gonzaga? Or a football player at a Liberty, although Liberty's got a great basketball program too. In fact, boy, let's have it be Liberty. All right. I just did an interview with the Falkirk Center at Liberty yesterday, actually. I'm not sure when that's going to be out. But their athletic programs there are outstanding, right? There's no denying that. They've been in they were in the NCAA tournament, won a game last year, just won a bowl game in football. I mean, this is among mid-major schools, one of the best athletic departments in the country. So what happens when Liberty kids start writing "Baby Lives Matter"? Or some Notre Dame, Gonzaga, Catholic University kid in the middle of the college basketball season during Sanctity of Life Month writes "Baby Lives Matter" on their shoes? What happens when some Bubba at Alabama writes Second Amendment on his shoes? Right to keep and bear arms. That's his Twitter bio. Right? This is going to happen. 100%. It's going to happen. Because we're going to delve into issues that there's a much more... Eventually, if you open the platform up, we're going to get to issues where there's a much greater divergence of opinion. Barack Obama gave my football coach, Jim Harbaugh, a shout out last week for marching with black players in Ann Arbor about police brutality. Notice he was silent, though, when the previous month, Jim Harbaugh was giving an interview to his old friend, the editor at National Review, and lamenting America's sacrificing of unborn children. Notice that there was not a shout out for that. So let's game theory this out. What happens? Do they just ignore it? Like they ignored Jim Harbaugh's pro-life appeal? Gentlemen, what do you think? Todd, I'll start with you.
It's going to depend a lot on the particular caste system. And that's what's happening. That is in place at each individual university you're talking about and the amount of leverage people think they can bring to bear there. I think you're going to have to be at something like a BYU, at least the BYU that I believe it to be in my mind, or a Liberty University, where you are pretty clearly going to be able to do that thing because it is defended at the highest levels of the institution. You mentioned Gonzaga, Gonzaga is a Jesuit university. It doesn't, that may as well be Berkeley. It's not going to matter.
I like how I called it Catholic and you came back with, that's actually a Jesuit university. It's not actually a Catholic school.
And Notre Dame, the women's soccer team in the last few days, and I follow that team because it's a place my daughter is interested in going, put out their perfunctory Black Lives Matter statement of sorts. I mean, it's just, if you don't need to read it because you've seen it already. Now, at Notre Dame, that team could put out a pro-life statement. It probably isn't, but it could, and it would be fine. At Boston College, probably not. So now we go down to Ohio State. That's definitely not going to fly. At Alabama, much better odds. So you have to. There's a risk reward. What pushback am I going to get ginned up if I step into that? If I'm a progressive and woke, they care much less about that than any other time. Mm-hmm. But what kind of buzzsaw if you try to pull that at Alabama you get versus what you're going to get at Ohio State? There's still a calculus of some kind, I think. But the caste and the calculus is about how powerful the caste system is at the particular institution it's happening in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't believe there's any calculation whatsoever. I think we're way past that point. I think it's pretty simple, the answer to this. I think the same people who are 100% behind what's going on right now, and you must kneel during the national anthem to protest police brutality against African Americans, the epidemic that isn't here in the United States. Those same people who burned the witch Drew Brees last week, they are going to do the complete 180 and burn the witch. You can't say that. You can't do that. They're going to make the exact opposite arguments that they're making right now against those people. So that's on social media. Now, as far as, let's just say, I don't know, maybe on the armband or on the cleats, somebody has "Baby Lives Matter." Here's what's going to happen at the networks. They're never going to show that. They're never going to mention it. They're never going to show that. There's no way, unless it's an accident, that that's going to go on air. On social media, the most leftist voices are going to burn the witch. Also on social media, they're going to have some takes from some moderate teammates who just say, he really needs to have a conversation with the guys in the locker room about that. We all have different opinions, but we all really need to be on the same page. And, I'm sure that he really needs to just think through things a little bit more and just understand where everybody's coming from, and that that way he can kind of go on a listening tour and just be able to understand where other people are coming at with this and why everybody's so mad about it. And next time he won't be quite so bold about making such controversial statements. That's going to be what's happening. Because we are so given over. The culture is so given over to this right now and at large that's going to be, there's not going to be any calculation. It's just going to be burn the witch. And at worst and at best, it's going to be, you just need to maybe sit back and listen and understand why that's such a controversial statement. And you should not do that. That's what it's going to be.
A few years ago, I spent some time going after what's his face that started Pro Football Talk. Now with NBC Sports, I can't remember his name.
Florio.
Yeah, Mike Florio, thank you. Because he's big cancel culture, grab ass dude. And I'm trying to remember what athlete it was. It might have been, it was when Tim Tebow was going to go speak at Robert Jefferson's church a few years ago. And he tried to cancel culture before we even knew what a cancel culture was. He tried to cancel culture Tim Tebow. He was still in the NFL at the time. And I just went in, and of course he does that Sunday night show during the NFL season with who every Sunday night? Tony Dungy. So I just went into Tony Dungy's Twitter feed. I just started sending and copying Mike Florio. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
On a whole bunch of stuff on Tony Dungy speaking at pro-family events, Tony Dungy, marriages between a man and a woman. And I'm like, how come cancel culture for Tim Tebow, but not for, well, except it wasn't called that then. It's just what we use now. But, why the offense in the cancel culture, proto-cancel culture at Tim Tebow and not at Tony Dungy? Why is he exempt? And of course, we know what the answer is. One guy's black and the other guy's name is Tim Tebow. And so he doesn't feel comfortable within his own ecosystem of coming at Tony Dungy. So he's just going to cognitive dissonance, pretend Tony Dungy doesn't have the exact same views Tim Tebow does, and go after Tim Tebow for them instead. I saw this earlier today, John Campea. If you're into fanboy movies, he's a great follow, has a lot of good information on stuff. But he was wondering why Warner Brothers came after the guy on the Flash TV show the white guy for racist tweets, but is letting Ezra Miller going for checking a woman or for choking a woman because Ezra Miller's gay. That's why they're letting it go, right?
Yeah.
We're going to see much more of this if you give all these athletes a platform, and I'm here for it. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck. Until then, John 3:17.